Silas Bennett was quietly eating dinner when the fork stopped halfway to Logan Harper's mouth. The young man that everyone admired as a self-made fintech millionaire had spent the entire meal staring at the far corner of the modest Capitol Hill dining room in Seattle, his eyes repeatedly drifting to the old wooden desk where Silas kept a few unimportant-looking papers. "You know, Silas," Logan finally said, setting the fork down with the kind of slow, theatrical precision that belonged on television. "With your retirement savings just sitting in some bank account earning almost nothing, I could show you real opportunities. My connections in the fintech world could easily turn that money into something that actually works for you. Maybe 6 or 7 times your current returns within a couple of years." Emily, sitting right beside him at the small table, shifted uncomfortably and reached for her water glass. Silas only smiled the calm, patient smile he had perfected over 45 years of spotting forgeries and frauds in the international art and collectibles market. "That's very generous of you, Logan," he answered evenly. "But at my age, I've learned to prefer boring and safe over exciting and risky. If you're watching this story, please subscribe to the channel, like button, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from." 8 months earlier, Emily had brought Logan home for the very first time. Silas still remembered every detail of that evening. Logan stepping out of his leased Porsche with all the unnecessary drama of a man who wanted to be noticed. The car gleaming under the streetlights like it had just rolled off the showroom floor. He had gripped Silas's hand with the over-eager enthusiasm of a politician on election day, his brand-new luxury watch catching every single ray of light in the entryway. While Emily made coffee in the kitchen, Logan had walked slowly through the house the way professional auction house appraisers walk through estate sales, eyes scanning every piece of furniture, every painting on the wall, mentally pricing and cataloging everything he saw. He's a successful fintech entrepreneur. Emily had whispered excitedly when they were alone for a moment. He already has an office downtown in the financial district and everything. Silas had simply nodded politely, noticing immediately how the designer suit hung too perfectly on Logan's frame. No wear at the cuffs or elbows. New money desperately trying to look like old money. Except Logan Harper had neither kind yet. Now, just 10 days before the wedding, Logan leaned back in Silas's favorite armchair as though he already owned the entire house and everything in it. "I'm completely serious. Silas," he continued, voice dripping with fake concern. "You could be earning real money instead of whatever little consulting fees you pick up here and there." "What is it? Maybe $75 an hour?" Emily's cheeks flushed bright red with instant embarrassment. "Logan, please stop. That's enough. I'm only saying your dad worked hard his whole life. He deserves better returns than a basic savings account that barely beats inflation." Silas stood with deliberate, measured calm and began gathering the dinner plates. "Anyone want another glass of wine?" Logan excused himself to the bathroom with a casual, confident smile. Through the reflection in the dark window, Silas watched him pause at the desk, phone already out, quickly angling it to photograph the bank statement Silas had deliberately left visible. An account that showed a comfortable but hardly impressive balance of $118,000. Logan never once looked up at the shelf directly above, where the leather-bound stamp albums sat quietly, dismissed as nothing more than an old man's harmless hobby. When Logan returned to the table, Emily was helping clear dishes in the kitchen. Through the half-open door, Silas heard the muffled but unmistakable voice on speakerphone, low and smug and full of satisfaction. $112,000 on this wedding, Logan bragged. "The old guy is absolutely loaded. Just wait until you see the rest of what's coming." A woman's voice answered immediately. "Just be patient," Lauren said softly. "Emily is the perfect key. She trusts you completely, 100%. She'll do anything you ask." Silas kept rinsing a plate under cold running water while Emily laughed at something on her phone in the next room, completely unaware of the conversation happening only 10 feet away. He had personally paid that $112,000 for the wedding at Chateau Saint-Michel in Woodinville wine country, because Emily's eyes had lit up like Christmas morning when she first saw the vineyard photos online. He had written every single check for the upgrades, the flowers, the extra lighting, every single suggestion Logan and his sister Lauren made while exchanging those quick, knowing glances Silas pretended not to notice. After they finally left, Emily hugged him warmly at the front door and told him again how happy she was, how perfect everything was going to be. Silas sat alone in the quiet house afterward, with his stamp collection spread out under the magnifying lamp. The single 1918 inverted Jenny centered under the light was worth $310,000 all by itself. The complete collection, carefully assembled over 35 years under the anonymous initials S.B. in the international art and collectibles world, was valued at more than $14 million. Logan had once flipped casually through one of the albums, made a dismissive comment about old postage stamps, and never looked again. Silas pulled out his phone and scrolled to Rebecca Lawson's number, his attorney and oldest friend in Seattle. She answered on the second ring despite the late hour. "Rebecca, it's Silas. I know it's late, but I need you to quietly check someone out for me. Name is Logan Harper. Claims he's a fintech entrepreneur with an office downtown." Rebecca was silent for a moment. Then her voice shifted into full lawyer mode. "I'll start making calls first thing tomorrow morning." Silas hung up and rested his hand on the leather albums worth millions that Logan Harper had dismissed as worthless. 45 years of spotting fakes and forgeries had taught him one thing above all else. Logan's performance was very good, but it was still a performance. The question was no longer whether the young man was a fraud. The question was exactly how deep the fraud went, and precisely what he was really after. Silas thought about Emily's text from earlier that evening. "Dad, I'm so happy. I can't wait for the wedding. The ceremony was only 10 days away. He could stop everything right now, confront them, cancel it all. But master collectors learn patience above everything else. You wait. You watch. You let the other side reveal every single card before you ever play your hand." The Chateau Saint-Michel vineyard in Woodinville wine country looked like something torn from the pages of a wedding magazine on the big day. Ancient oak trees lined the stone pathways. Endless rows of grapes stretched toward the Cascade Mountains. Perfect March sunshine filtered through the leaves. Warm, but not hot. Absolutely perfect weather that money cannot buy, but luck sometimes provides. 220 guests filled the reception barn, champagne glasses catching every ray of light, laughter rising in waves that should have felt joyful and celebratory. Silas stood at the edge of the dance floor watching his daughter Emily in her wedding dress, and felt the wrongness of it all settle in his chest like a heavy stone. She looked beautiful, radiant even. The dress fit perfectly. Her hair swept up exactly the way she had planned for months. But when the band started the father-daughter song and the guests cleared the floor, only Silas saw what no one else did. Her hands were trembling as she placed them on his shoulders. They began the slow rotation expected of them under 220 pairs of eyes. Emily leaned close, her smile frozen perfectly for the cameras, and whispered so softly only he could hear, "Dad, read this when you're alone. Please." The small envelope slipped into his jacket pocket so smoothly that he almost missed the motion entirely. Her eyes met his for one fraction of a second. Desperate, apologetic, terrified all at once. Silas kept dancing, kept smiling, finished the entire song without missing a step. Then he kissed her forehead gently and walked with measured, calm steps toward the restroom while his heart hammered against his ribs like a war drum. Inside the private bathroom, he locked the door, braced both hands on the cool marble counter, and pulled out the envelope with fingers that had gone suddenly ice cold. Hotel stationery. Emily's handwriting shaky but perfectly clear. Dad, help me. 4 days ago, I overheard Logan on the phone with Lauren. He said he's marrying me for your money, that I'm an easy target, and that after the wedding, he'll convince me to put you in a memory care facility to access your savings. Everything is already paid for. Everyone is here. I didn't know what else to do. Please stop this. Silas read it twice. In the mirror, his reflection changed completely. Something hard and ancient woke behind his eyes. Something that hadn't been there for 20 years. Not since he stepped away from the brutal negotiations of the art world and chose a quiet life for Emily's sake. He folded the note with precise, careful movements, tucked it back into his pocket, straightened his tie, and opened the bathroom door, a completely different man. The reception hall still buzzed with conversation and clinking glasses outside. Silas found Logan at the bar surrounded by 4 friends in rental tuxedos, all of them laughing loudly at something he had just said. Old man's money well spent. Right, fellas? Logan's voice carried over the crowd, thick with whiskey and arrogance. Give it 8 months before we have full access to every account. Emily will sign anything I put in front of her. Several guests had noticed Silas standing only 12 feet behind him, their expressions shifting from amusement to discomfort. Logan didn't see the change, too drunk on his own cleverness and the expensive whiskey. Silas walked straight to the small stage where the band had set up, picked up the microphone, and the music stopped mid-note. Silence crashed over the entire reception barn like a wave. "This wedding is canceled," Silas said, his voice calm, cold, absolute, cutting through the air like a blade. 220 faces turned toward him at once. Logan's mouth fell open, glass frozen halfway to his lips, his brain struggling to process what was happening. "I have information that makes this marriage impossible," Silas continued, letting the words hang heavy in the silence. "Emily, come with me now." Emily was already moving, tears streaming down her face, dress rustling as she crossed the floor and took his extended hand. They walked together through 220 stunned guests while phones came out and cameras started recording everything. Logan's voice finally rose behind them, stammering protests that convinced absolutely no one. "Emily, wait. Your father is confused. He doesn't understand what's happening." Lauren appeared beside her brother, gripping his arm hard, hissing sharply. "Shut up, Logan. You're making it worse. How could it be worse?" he shouted back, voice cracking. "He knows. Somehow he knows everything." The cool parking lot air hit them like freedom itself. Silas opened the car door for Emily, looked back once at the barn entrance, saw Logan burst through the doors with Lauren desperately trying to pull him back while guests spilled out filming the entire scene. In the rearview mirror, Logan dropped to his knees on the pavement as Silas drove away, leaving Woodinville wine country behind forever. Emily cried quietly in the passenger seat the entire drive home. Silas reached over and squeezed her hand gently. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart," he said simply, voice steady and strong. "But first, they need to understand. They made a very serious mistake." The car turned onto the highway toward Seattle, the vineyard disappearing in the mirrors. Somewhere behind them, Logan Harper's carefully constructed world had just shattered in front of 220 witnesses. Silas woke at 5 the next morning, the Capitol Hill house still completely dark. Emily was asleep down the hall in her childhood bedroom, the one he had never changed since she moved out at 26. He made coffee with quiet, automatic movements while his mind cataloged everything that needed to happen next. Logan Harper had tried to con his daughter, had planned to institutionalize him like an animal, all for money he wrongly believed existed. The wedding had cost $112,000 he would never recover. Silas sat at his desk, pulled out Emily's note again, and read it one more time, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. Not from fear, from pure, controlled fury that finally had direction and purpose. He texted Rebecca Lawson, "Need to see you this morning. Urgent. 9 o'clock. Her response came within seconds. "My office. Come as early as you need." Rebecca's law firm occupied the 22nd floor downtown, with a sweeping view across Puget Sound, morning light turning the water silver and calm. She stood when Silas entered, her expression already serious. Lawyer instincts reading the emergency immediately. He handed her Emily's note without a word. She read it twice, jaw tightening with every line. "This is elder financial exploitation. That's a felony in Washington state. But we need hard evidence beyond just the note." Silas nodded once. "Then we get everything on Logan Harper and his sister Lauren. Bank records, debts, past relationships, every detail." Rebecca looked up at him, and recognition flashed in her eyes. She remembered exactly who Silas used to be and what he was truly worth. "They picked the wrong target this time, Silas." "Yes," he answered quietly. "They really did." That same afternoon, Silas walked next door to Robert Walsh's house. Robert was 72, retired from the Seattle Times after 40 years as an investigative legend. And they had played chess every Wednesday night for the past 12 years. Robert answered the door in his usual cardigan, reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck. "Silas, you look like hell. Come in." Over tea in a living room buried under stacks of old newspapers and books, Silas told him everything except the true size of his hidden wealth. Robert's reporter instincts ignited instantly, eyes sharpening, posture straightening like he was 30 again. "Give me 5 days. If there's any dirt at all, I'll find it. Nobody tries to cage my chess partner and walks away clean." 5 days later, Robert stopped by with a thick manila folder and a satisfied grin. Casino markers totaling $620,000 from Las Vegas. Business loans adding up to $2.4 million across 3 institutions. IRS tax liens for $410,000. A previous engagement to a wealthy Mercer Island heiress that ended suddenly with a sealed settlement. A startup already in Chapter 11 bankruptcy 14 months ago. A co-working desk rented for $500 a month. The Porsche on lease. Every lie Logan Harper had ever told laid out in 50 pages of court documents, credit reports, and financial records obtained through Robert's still active sources. "There's a clear pattern here," Silas said quietly as he closed the folder. "Oh yeah," Robert replied. "This definitely isn't his first time." "You want me to dig deeper?" Robert asked. "Not yet," Silas answered. "Let me decide exactly how to use this first." By late April, the evidence folders were spread across Silas's desk like a battle map. Rebecca visited that evening with printed legal strategies, restraining order drafts, fraud documentation, and protective measures for his assets. Robert had brought contact information for his old colleagues still working at the Seattle Times and the Puget Sound Business Journal, reporters who specialized in white-collar fraud stories. Silas studied Logan's Facebook photo Robert had printed. Young, handsome, confident smile. The smile of someone who believed he was smarter than everyone around him. "You thought I was just an old man with a modest pension," Silas said quietly to the photograph. "That was your biggest mistake." Emily appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of tea. "Dad, you've been in here for hours." Silas closed the folders carefully. "Just paperwork, sweetheart." She set a cup beside him and hesitated. "Are you okay? You've been so quiet lately." "I'm gathering every piece of information," he told her. "When you move against someone, you need to know everything." "Move against?" she asked. Voice small. "Justice," Silas said simply. "He tried to use you, tried to cage me. That requires consequences." Emily nodded slowly, kissed the top of his head, and left him to his work. Silas opened his laptop and pulled up an email he had already drafted to Richard Preston, vice president at Wells Fargo, a man he had once helped authenticate a disputed painting for the bank's corporate collection. He typed carefully, "Richard, hope you're well. Wondering if you might quietly review some concerning information about potentially fraudulent loan documentation." Attached a file Robert had prepared with just facts and no accusations. Then hit send. His phone buzzed almost immediately. Logan's number calling Emily again. The 7th attempt that week. Silas watched it ring through to voicemail and let him wonder. Let him worry. The trap was fully set. Tomorrow the first piece would fall. 4 days later, the doorbell rang at 10 in the morning. The security camera showed Logan Harper standing on the porch with cheap grocery store flowers wrapped in cellophane. Definitely not the expensive arrangements he used to bring. Silas opened the door, but did not invite him inside. Silas. Logan began with a rehearsed smile that was already cracking. "I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Whatever you heard, whatever Emily said, we can work this out. I love your daughter." Silas looked at him with flat, cold eyes. "No misunderstanding. No working it out. No second chances. Do not come back." He closed the door firmly. Through the window, he watched Logan stand there for a full minute. Face cycling through confusion, anger, calculation. Sweat visible on his forehead despite the cool morning. Clothes noticeably cheaper than before. Designer labels replaced with department store brands. The pressure was already showing. April 15th arrived with perfect, cruel irony. Tax day for a man carrying $410,000 in IRS liens. Richard Preston, at Wells Fargo, had quietly reviewed the information and made discreet inquiries to the 3 lending institutions that had given Logan his startup loans. All 3 discovered on the same morning that the loan applications contained fabricated income statements and forged tax documents. 3 certified letters demanding immediate repayment of $2.4 million hit Logan's mailbox at once. Robert's source at one of the banks later described the phone calls that followed. Logan's voice rising from confusion to panic, demanding to speak to supervisors, insisting there had to be some mistake. There were no mistakes, only consequences. That evening, Lauren Harper showed up at Silas's door, ringing the bell repeatedly. He watched through the camera as she finally wedged a handwritten note in the doorframe. "We need to talk about Emily's future. This is between adults." Silas tore the note in half and dropped it in the trash. The next day, an anonymous tip reached Robert's old colleague at the Puget Sound Business Journal about concerning patterns in local fintech lending and authorities reviewing potentially fraudulent loan applications. The article was vague enough to be legal, specific enough that everyone in Logan's small business circle connected the dots instantly. His last scheduled meeting with a potential investor was canceled by text. His co-working space manager sent an email reviewing the lease due to member complaints. The Porsche leasing company sent a late payment notice because the automatic payment had bounced. Everything was closing in exactly as planned. Silas maintained his normal routine. Morning walks through Green Lake Park, Wednesday chess with Robert, cooking simple dinners for Emily, who was slowly recovering. Robert dropped by one Saturday with quiet updates while Emily was upstairs. "Your friend Logan got asked to vacate his co-working desk yesterday. Too many complaints about his business practices. Word travels fast when someone makes sure it does." Silas nodded calmly. "Let it develop naturally for now. Desperation makes people careless. He'll make more mistakes." That evening, Emily sat across from him at the kitchen table with tea, staring at her phone like she expected it to ring. "Logan came by last week. Didn't he?" she asked suddenly. The doorbell camera caught something. "He did," Silas answered. "I sent him away." "How do you feel about that?" she asked quietly. "Relieved," she said after a pause. "And sad. I really thought—" She shook her head, unable to finish. "But I heard what he said to Lauren. I know what he planned." Silas reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You were kind. He took advantage. That's on him. Never on you. Across the city, Logan and Lauren were spiraling fast. Robert had a contact in Logan's apartment building who overheard conversations through thin walls. Logan pacing at midnight. Lauren's voice sharp with stress. Bills and calculators spread across the table showing impossible math. 3 separate banks. Same day. Lauren had hissed. Someone orchestrated this. The old man, Logan had answered. He's just a retired consultant in Capitol Hill. What power does he have? Doubt was creeping in. The kind you feel when the weather is about to change. They decided to fight back the only way they could think of. They would sue Silas for emotional damages from the canceled wedding. He'll settle to avoid publicity, Lauren had argued. We get something, anything, to pay down the debts. Logan agreed instantly. Yeah, he's old. He'll cave. That was their fatal miscalculation. The email from Rebecca Lawson arrived on a Tuesday evening. They're suing you. Silas opened the attachment and started laughing. Actually laughing. A deep, genuine sound that felt foreign after weeks of controlled tension. Logan Harper was seeking $800,000 in emotional damages and lost future earnings. Lauren had added her own claim for $140,000 in lost wedding planning fees and reputation damage. Emily appeared in the doorway, worried. Dad Silas wiped his eyes, still smiling. They just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They're taking me to court. That's not funny, she said, voice small. Don't worry, he told her. They brought a knife to a gunfight. And they don't even know I'm armed. The process server arrived the next morning during breakfast with official documents. Thick envelope, Superior Court of Washington seal. Logan Harper versus Silas Bennett. Claim $800,000 for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Breach of promise. Public humiliation. Lauren Harper added $140,000 for lost fees and professional damage. Emily watched nervously as Silas read through the complaint calmly, almost peacefully. He called Rebecca immediately. They served me. Her voice on the other end was gleeful. I know. I already have the documents. Can you come to my office in an hour? We're going to have some real fun now. At the law firm's conference room overlooking the financial district, Rebecca spread Logan's lawsuit across the polished table like a battle plan. This is the best gift they could have given us, she said, eyes gleaming. By filing suit, they open the door to full discovery. We get to subpoena everything. Bank records, communications, past relationships, everything. And we counter with elder financial abuse charges, felony level. She pulled out Emily's note, the recorded phone call transcript, Robert's evidence folder, documentation of Logan's debts and fraudulent loans. We're countersuing for $9 million, Rebecca said, completely serious. Washington elder abuse statutes allow triple damages plus attorney fees. You're 67. He planned to institutionalize you for financial gain. We have it on record. $9 million is actually conservative. By 3 that afternoon, they stood in King County Superior Court. Logan and Lauren appeared with an attorney who looked like he had taken the case that morning. Cheap suit, papers disorganized, already sweating. The judge reviewed Rebecca's emergency filing. Emily's note, the transcript, the mountain of evidence. Logan's attorney tried weakly to argue this was just a private family dispute. The judge cut him off instantly. This is alleged elder abuse. Washington takes this very seriously. She looked directly at Logan, voice like steel. Mr. Harper, I've reviewed the evidence. Your alleged plan to institutionalize Mr. Bennett to access his assets is deeply disturbing, Logan's attorney stammered. Your Honor, that's taken out of context. Counselor, the judge replied, I have a transcript, nursing home, full financial guardianship, access to his accounts. What context makes that acceptable? Silence filled the courtroom. Rebecca stood and presented the countersuit. Fraud, attempted elder financial abuse, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy, $9 million in damages, plus immediate restraining order, 100 yards minimum distance from Silas and Emily Bennett. Logan's face drained of every drop of color. Lauren looked like she might be sick. The judge ruled from the bench without hesitation. Mr. Harper, Miss Harper, I'm granting a temporary restraining order effective immediately. You are not to contact, approach within 100 yards, or communicate in any way with Silas or Emily Bennett pending full hearing. This includes phone, email, text, social media, or third-party contact. Violation will result in immediate arrest. She set a preliminary hearing for the countersuit 10 days later and looked down at Logan with clear warning. Mr. Harper, given the evidence presented today, I strongly suggest you secure competent legal counsel. This is extremely serious, Logan tried to speak, voice cracking. I'm done, Mr. Harper, the judge said firmly. The next case. Rebecca and Silas walked out, while Logan and Lauren remained seated, stunned, their attorney frantically taking notes, finally understanding how completely they had lost. Outside the courthouse, the spring sunshine felt harsh after the dim courtroom. Logan and Lauren emerged moments later, standing on the courthouse steps, exactly 100 yards away by law. Silas leaned lightly on his walking stick. He didn't actually need it, but it emphasized his age perfectly. Then turned, looked directly across the plaza, locked eyes with Logan, raised one hand in a small, cold wave, and gave the faintest smile. Logan saw it. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition. Fear. The first true understanding that he had not been fighting a scared old man, but someone who had planned every step of this. Silas turned away, said something quiet to Rebecca that made her laugh, and they walked to her car while Logan and Lauren stood frozen on the courthouse steps, beginning to realize they were in a fight they could never win. That evening, Robert Walsh called with a grin in his voice. The courthouse filing is public record now. I have friends at the Seattle Times who would love a story about attempted elder financial abuse. Want me to plant some seeds? Not yet, Silas answered. Let Logan make the next mistake first. Desperation guarantees it. After hanging up, he sat with his stamp collection, examining a rare 19th century stamp worth $280,000 through the magnifying glass. Hands perfectly steady, mind perfectly clear. Logan and Lauren were only just beginning to realize they had picked a fight with someone who had patience, resources, and absolutely nothing to lose. The restraining order meant they couldn't come within 100 yards. The countersuit meant they were bleeding money they didn't have. The court date 10 days away meant they had almost no time to figure out an impossible situation. Silas placed the stamp carefully back in its protective sleeve. He had built this collection over decades with patience and precision. Dismantling Logan Harper's life would require exactly the same skills, and he had all the time in the world. 3 days after the hearing, Robert's column appeared in the Puget Sound Business Journal. Headline: Elder Financial Abuse. A growing threat in Seattle. He didn't name Logan or Lauren directly, but he described a recent case involving a 36-year-old entrepreneur who allegedly planned to institutionalize his fiancée's 67-year-old father to access retirement savings. Canceled wedding at Woodinville. Restraining order. Court documents. Details specific enough for anyone in their social circle to recognize instantly. Within 48 hours, the article had been shared across local social media more than 900 times. Logan's remaining business contacts saw it. Lauren's real estate clients saw it. The Whisper campaign became a roar. They were finished socially, permanently. Robert told Silas over chess that Wednesday, "Your friends are done. My sources say Lauren is under investigation by the Washington Department of Licensing." Logan got evicted from his co-working space yesterday. Creditors filed for Chapter 7, the day after the court deadline passed. Everything they own, which isn't much, gets liquidated. The Porsche was repossessed last week. He had to Uber to his bankruptcy consultation and couldn't even afford the retainer. Silas moved a night calmly. The dominoes are falling exactly as planned. 2 weeks later, Silas stood in the Seattle Asian Art Museum surrounded by Seattle society at its finest. Tech executives, old money families, philanthropists who shaped the city's cultural world. The charity auction for the Elder Financial Protection Fund had drawn a huge crowd. Silas had helped organize it through his old art world connections. Still not revealing he was S.B., just a concerned donor who had recently learned how real this issue was. His personal contribution was an authenticated early Banksy print valued at $1.4 million. Emily stood beside him that night, elegant in a simple black dress, healing slowly but surely, holding her head high again. During the speeches, a speaker told a story remarkably similar to theirs. A man in his 30s who planned to institutionalize his girlfriend's father to steal retirement savings. No names, but people in the room connected every dot. Silas had arranged it through the organizers. He saw the knowing glances, the whispered conversations, the social media posts already starting. Logan and Lauren weren't there, of course, but they would see the photos tomorrow. The glittering crowd, the Banksy, people openly discussing elder abuse with very pointed implications. "That Banksy you donated," Emily said later, examining the auction catalog. "That was worth $1.4 million according to the estimate. Logan thought you had maybe 500,000 or 600,000 total. You just gave away more than double what he believed you owned." Silas smiled without humor. "It went to a very good cause, and it made a point." The next morning, Rebecca called with final updates. Logan and Lauren both filed bankruptcy separately. Smart move by Lauren, trying to distance herself legally. "Bankruptcy court takes precedence, but our judgment still stands. They'll never pay it, but it follows them forever. Credit destroyed. Employment prospects ruined for any position of trust. Mission accomplished. I'm not trying to collect money," Silas told her. "I'm trying to make sure they never do this to another family." "Then consider it done," Rebecca replied. Robert's sources reported their final deterioration in detail. Logan and Lauren had moved into the same tiny studio temporarily. Both broke, both unemployed, screaming at each other nightly until Lauren finally moved out and crashed with a friend in West Seattle. The partnership destroyed by shared guilt. Then one letter arrived that Emily brought to him, postmarked from a minimum security facility. She watched his face carefully. "It came through a friend from teaching. He asked her to pass it to me. He knows he can't contact me directly because of the restraining order." Silas read Logan's emotional, well-written, deeply manipulative letter claiming Lauren had pushed him into everything, insisting his feelings for Emily had been real, begging for one meeting to explain. Emily looked at him quietly. "I'm thinking about meeting him, just once, in public, just to give him closure." Every protective instinct screamed no, but Silas remembered Rebecca's advice weeks ago. You can't shield her forever. She needs to see who he really is with her own eyes. "You're an adult," Silas said carefully. "This is your choice. But if you go, it's in broad daylight, public place, and I'll be close by the entire time." They chose Blue Bottle Coffee on Capitol Hill, Saturday afternoon. Silas positioned himself across the street in his car where Emily could see him through the window. Robert Walsh sat inside at a corner table with a newspaper and a discreet recording device they had arranged for safety. Through the window, Silas watched Logan arrive first. Unshaven, clothes hanging loose, eyes hollow, a shadow of the polished man who had once courted his daughter. When Emily walked in, Logan stood with what looked like genuine tears. Silas couldn't hear the conversation, only watched body language. 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Then Emily stood abruptly, placed her coffee cup at the exact edge of the table, the prearranged signal. and walked out without looking back. She crossed the street, got in the car, sat in silence for a long moment, then spoke clearly. "You were right about everything. He asked me to get money from you. Even now, broke and desperate, it was still about money." Silas covered her hand with his. "I'm sorry you had to see it." "I'm not," she answered, voice steady. "I needed to see it myself. Now I know for sure." Robert called as they drove home, voice quietly satisfied. Got everything on high-quality audio. He violated the spirit of the restraining order by trying to use her to reach you. And he openly admitted hearing rumors about your wealth. This is gold. That evening, Rebecca called with the news Silas had been waiting for. "The King County prosecutor is filing formal charges tomorrow. Tax fraud, loan fraud, attempted elder financial abuse. They want you to testify at the preliminary hearing in 3 weeks." "Will I have to reveal my resources if Logan's attorney claims I'm exaggerating?" Silas asked. "Yes," Rebecca answered. "This is when the SB reveal happens in open court. Your choice. We can try to keep it sealed or we can do it publicly." Emily was listening. She nodded firmly at her father. "Do it. Dad, let everyone know who you really are. You've hidden long enough." 3 weeks later, in the packed King County courtroom, during Logan's bankruptcy hearing, Logan saw Silas sitting in the gallery and completely lost control. He stood suddenly, chair scraping loud in the silence, shouting, "This is all his fault. That old man destroyed my life. He canceled my wedding, turned my fiancée against me, called my creditors, ruined everything. All because he's a bitter, lonely pensioner who couldn't stand to lose his daughter." The judge, a woman in her late 50s with steel-gray hair, called for order. Rebecca stood smoothly. "Your Honor, Mr. Harper is making very serious allegations. Perhaps Mr. Bennett should be allowed to respond and clarify his actual circumstances." The judge looked at Silas. "Mr. Bennett, please approach the witness stand." Silas walked forward calmly, was sworn in, took his seat while Logan glared from the defendant's table, breathing hard. "Mr. Bennett," the judge said, "please explain your relationship to this case." Silas spoke calmly, deliberately, voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. "I'm Silas Bennett, 67 years old. I live in a modest house on Capitol Hill that I paid off years ago. For the past 20 years, I have lived quietly and simply so my daughter could grow up normal." He paused, looked directly at Logan. "But Mr. Harper is mistaken about who I actually am." Logan leaned forward, confusion and anger mixing on his face. "In the international art world," Silas continued, "I have been known for 35 years only as SB. I built one of the most valuable private collections of contemporary art and rare stamps on the West Coast. Total value exceeding $75 million. The courtroom went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Logan's mouth actually fell open. Silas continued without raising his voice. "My collection includes major works by Basquiat, Keith Haring, early Banksy pieces, the Keith Haring original hanging in my living room that Mr. Harper walked past countless times thinking it was just a poster. Authenticated value $3.2 million. My philatelic collection alone exceeds $14 million. Rebecca approached with a thick folder. "Your Honor, full documentation, authentication certificates, insurance schedules, auction records going back decades." The judge reviewed the papers carefully while Logan's face cycled through horror, humiliation, rage. He stood again shouting, You had $75 million and you let me think you were nobody. You were playing me the whole time." Rebecca's voice cut like ice. "No, Mr. Harper. You were playing yourself, Mr. Bennett was simply living his life. You chose to target him and his daughter." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Mr. Harper, sit down and be silent. The court recognizes that Mr. Bennett had every right to protect himself and his daughter from your documented scheme. The evidence of your fraudulent intent is overwhelming." Silas added one final statement from the stand. Voice steady and clear. "I lived modestly by choice for 20 years to protect my daughter from people exactly like you. Turns out even modesty wasn't enough. But I'm done hiding now. The world can know who I am because people need to understand that age is not weakness. Kindness is not vulnerability. And underestimating someone based on appearances is always a mistake." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Court reporters typed frantically. Phones were already sending messages. By that evening, the Seattle Times headline read, "Mystery Art World, Legend S.B. revealed as Seattle father who foiled fortune hunter's plot," with full photos of the herring, selected rare stamps, and quotes from stunned art world figures finally learning the identity of the legendary collector. Silas's phone rang constantly for days. Interview requests, museum exhibition proposals, gallery offers. Robert Walsh stopped by that night with a bottle of good whiskey and a huge grin. "You're a celebrity now, old friend." "How does it feel strange?" Silas admitted, pouring 2 glasses. "I hid for 20 years. Now everyone knows. But maybe transparency is the best protection after all." Emily read the online comments aloud, laughing for the first time in months. "They're calling you a protective genius, and Logan perhaps the most incompetent con artist in Pacific Northwest history." A week later, Rebecca called with the final chapter. "Logan accepted a plea deal this morning. 24 months federal prison for tax and loan fraud. Sentencing next week. Lauren's bankruptcy is final. She lost her real estate license permanently. It's over. Silas, you won." "It's not about winning," he answered quietly, watching Emily sketch happily in the living room. "It's about making sure they can never do this to another family." 2 letters arrived months later. One from federal prison, one from a cheap apartment in Tacoma. Logan's letter was raw, broken, apologetic, written from a place of total defeat. Lauren's letter was shorter, written on cheap paper, describing her new life answering phones for $13 an hour. Every word soaked in regret. Silas read both carefully, then wrote 2 short, identical replies. "Your apology is noted and accepted. Use these consequences to become someone different. The doors to our lives are closed permanently, but the doors forward are always open if you choose to walk through them with honesty." He signed both simply, Silas Bennett. That fall, the exhibition Wisdom and Worth Protecting Our Elders opened at the Seattle Asian Art Museum. Silas's entire collection on public display for the first time. Every piece with full authentication and provenance. The herring from his living room. Major Basquiat works. Early Banksy pieces. Rare stamps under glass. Each labeled with its true multi-million-dollar value. He gave a short speech to a packed gallery of collectors, philanthropists, elder advocacy groups, and press. "I hid these treasures for 20 years to give my daughter a normal childhood. Then someone tried to use my daughter to steal them. Tonight I show them not to boast, but to prove a point. Appearances deceive. Age does not mean vulnerability. Kindness does not mean weakness. Never prey on those you think cannot fight back. Sometimes they fight back perfectly." Afterward, Silas watched Emily laughing with Jacob, the young museum curator who had helped organize the show. Early 30s, genuinely passionate about art, asking intelligent questions, never once mentioning net worth. Robert Walsh raised a glass nearby and grinned. "That one seems substantially better than the last guy." "He hasn't asked about my bank account once," Silas replied, smiling for real. Rebecca joined them, eyes bright. "So, now that you're public, What's next? I'm thinking of making the Elder Protection Fund permanent, Silas said. Maybe establish a foundation. Use part of the collection to teach people how to protect themselves. Seems a better legacy than keeping it all in my living room. The exhibition ended. Emily and Silas drove home together through the Seattle night. I'm proud of you, Dad, she said quietly. You could have just called the police and been done with it. Instead, you taught them a lesson they'll never forget. Protected countless other people, and turned the whole thing into something that will help seniors for years. I had resources they didn't expect, he answered. Not everyone does. That's why the fund matters. At home, he returned to his study one last time, pulled out a new acquisition. A pristine penny black from 1840 he had just purchased at auction for $350,000. He examined it under the magnifying lamp. The detail still perfect after nearly 2 centuries. He thought about the past 8 months, the canceled wedding, the investigation, the courtroom reveal, the victory, but mostly he thought about Emily. Safe, healing, learning to trust again. Wiser now. The stamp went into its protective sleeve. The album closed with a soft thud. Life continues. He was no longer hiding. The people who had tried to use him were living with permanent consequences. But they were living. That was grace. The albums on the shelf contained millions. The walls held millions more. But the real treasure was in the next room. His daughter. Safe, happy, and wise. That was the victory that mattered. Silas turned off the study light and walked toward the sound of Emily's laughter echoing gently through the house. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories that celebrate the courage it takes to protect the ones we love. Thank you for your time and for staying with us until the very end.